still watching The Perspective. I'm Florence Armin. We're start talking to Sonita Lontoh on the Internet of Things and Silicon Valley. You are the chairman of the
Indonesian
Diaspora Foundation in the US, and you've been in Silicon Valley more than half of your life. So if you can, is there a possibility for us to develop a Silicon Valley-like a zone here in Indonesia, Sonita?
I think the code word there is Silicon Valley-like.
Right.
Because I think to completely emulate Silicon Valley, I think it's impossible.
Of course.
Not just for Indonesia, I think for anyone, because China had tried to do the same thing. And there's nothing wrong with that, because I think each country and each region has its own history and its own kind of like advantages and disadvantages, right? So when people say, is it possible to recreate Silicon Valley? I think yes, it is possible, but it's with an Indonesian flavor, because there are certain things that I think just not possible. So for instance, the US has a pretty open immigration policy. So a lot of the best and brightest from around the world are actually in Silicon Valley, right? Either to go to school or to start a company or to work, blah, blah. But that may not be possible with Indonesia because we do not have such a history with our immigration, for instance. But basically, the way I think about it, there are really three factors, that will help us to build a Silicon Valley-like ecosystem here in Indonesia. The first one is actually human capital. That's actually one of the most important things. And that can be achieved through, I think the government has to support this, with R&D centers, with like universities. Part of the reason Silicon Valley is very vibrant because there is Berkeley, there is Stanford, there is NASA, like there's all this like research R&D centers and universities around.
Education has got to be a big chunk.
Exactly. So human capital development. And then the second one is to create an ecosystem of mentors, advisors, financiers, that like accelerators and incubators and all that, right? So let's talk about from the financing perspective. I think the Indonesian VC industry is emerging. However, let's just be honest, it's like really new, and actually there has not been like a big successful exit yet. And of course, for financing to work, there has to be a big exit because they have to make money. And so like all this ecosystem, what I call like tech ecosystem has to be developed. And then I would say the last but not least is a little bit abstract but needs to be there. We need to have the culture of risk-taking and entrepreneurialism, which I think in Silicon Valley people are that way because traditionally, even since the gold rush in the 1800s, like a lot of people who are maverick, they came to San Francisco area to look for gold, and then eventually
keep digging.
And then kept digging, and then there's like the earthquake and the fires, and then they kept at it, and eventually, of course, Silicon Valley, different types of people came from all over the world looking for, I guess, like to create new things that maybe result in gold for them. But what I'm saying is, it's not to create gold, but what I'm saying is you have to have that culture of risk-taking and entrepreneurialism, and it's really a confluence of like attitudes and cultures that accumulate over time. So it's not going to happen in one day, overnight, but then over time. And I think Indonesians should embrace that mindset.
And again, going back, the education system should somehow allow students to start making their own decisions, to take that risk, to live by it, to learn from it, and that's how that's the best way they can learn.
Right, and perhaps make like math and science one of the fun things that kids can learn. Even maybe starting to code. I'm not saying coding is everything, but you should know a little bit about the technology.
Just allow them to have an open mind about a lot of things. Now,
exactly.
What can Indonesia have learned from the ecosystem? How can we learn from ecosystem from Silicon Valley, and that can be implemented in the ecosystem in Indonesia?
I think we are already starting to implement some of them. So I know there are some accelerators and incubators here. I'm not quite sure as to like whether they're only providing a space and mentorship, or they also provide seed financing to help them to get from seed to Series A. I'm not sure yet, but let's have more accelerators and incubators that are high quality. That's, I'm not saying that's easy, but let's do that. And then the second thing could be just curriculum. In universities, let's make our curriculum less memorization based, and more kind of like innovation,
practical,
and leadership based. Because again, I actually spent my elementary school and part of my junior high school here. And the way I remember it, but of course that was a long time ago, right, Flo? It's like we're very good.
I'm sure it's not too far back.
But we're very good, I think, with discipline and memorization, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. But, you know, with that kind of educational system, it's very hard to create innovators, you know? So we need to kind of change our curriculums a little bit. And then last but not least, just be daring and don't be afraid to fail. And you know, I think here in Indonesia there is still a stigma. You know, if you fail, that means like, oh my God, like, you know, it's the end of the world. You're doomed for life. But in Silicon Valley, you can see like with each failure, you learn from it, and then you become better for the next one.
Now, last but not least, Sonita, what are Indonesia's current challenges in trying to get tech or an ecosystem to get going? Besides, there's got to be political will from
the policymakers and government, of course, infrastructure, right? Like the bandwidth and all that has to be available. I would say knowledge. Knowledge. I think a lot of our young people are very enthusiastic. You know, I've heard like so many people starting companies, but it seems like they just do not yet have the knowledge to like build a product at scale that like gives excellent user experience. And then, you know, just like boring things like payment systems, you know, so for instance, how can you do e-commerce if like payment's still like a problem, right? So things like that, you know, like kind of like the basic stuff.
All right, Sonita, thank you so much. It's been fun talking to and really, truly is eye-opener and interesting to talk about Internet of Things. And we look forward to talking to you again in the next few months and see how the application or the conversation has taken place here in within the country or the region, and how Indonesia has progressed from our last conversation. Thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you.
Being here.
Thank you very much.
That was Sonita Lontoh on The Perspective to talk about that. She was talking about Internet of Things and also how Indonesia can build its own Silicon Valley-like ecosystem, tech ecosystem right here in the country. I'm Florence Armain. Thank you for watching.